What keeps most people broke isn't a lack of intelligence. It's ignorance, plain and simple. Ignorance of how money works and how small habits shape your entire financial future. And today, you're going to hear some of the strongest financial guidance you'll ever come across, the kind that completely changed the way I think about earning, spending, and saving. We live in a society that makes overspending effortless. Credit is pushed at us from every direction. Debt is marketed as normal. Entire platforms are built to get you to buy things you don't need. And if you're buying those things, especially on credit, you're building habits that quietly trap you. Because every dollar of debt is a piece of your future that someone else owns. You can have money and still have no independence. So what do? You treat saving like an expense, just as mandatory as rent or groceries. And the most powerful thing you can do is automate it. Every paycheck, even if it's only $50, move it into savings before you ever touch it. Make it automatic, and you remove the hardest part, relying on willpower. Because life will test you. Job loss, illness, recessions, relationship breakdowns, something on that list will happen to you. It's a guarantee. And when it does, the savings you've built will be more valuable than anything you've ever bought. And if you're thinking, what's the point? I can barely pay my bills. I hear you. I understand that frustration. But I want you to know this. Your ability to build stability, freedom, and financial independence is absolutely in your control. It doesn't matter where you come from, how much you earn, or what your past looks like. Wealth isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about how you think and behave with money. Behavior is something every one of us can change. And I've seen people with no degree, no special background, nothing but discipline and patience, become incredibly stable and successful financially. And I've seen people with elite education, elite jobs, elite opportunities go completely broke. That's the difference. In most fields, the untrained can't outperform the expert. But with money, behavior beats brilliance every single day. And that means your starting point doesn't matter. What matters is what you choose to do next. This happens with money because it's not about what you know. You don't need secret formulas, and you don't need special connections. If you get your thinking right and your behavior right, you can do well. Patience, keeping your expectations in check, not comparing yourself to other people, and using money as a tool to build a better life instead of a yardstick to measure yourself against others. This is simple stuff. And the truth is, about 99% of what you need to succeed with money is already in your control. For a long time, I made the same mistake a lot of people make. I believed there was some hidden formula, some private club for rich people, that it all came down to who you know or where you went to school. But that's focusing on the wrong things. What actually matters are behaviors, real, learnable behaviors that help you get good with money. And the reality is they're not complicated. They're not easy, but they are simple, and they're fully within your control. If you can focus on your own goals instead of constantly comparing yourself to others, if you can save a portion of what you earn, live even slightly below your means, invest consistently, and stay patient, that alone puts you ahead of most people. That's not advanced finance. That's not Wall Street jargon or complicated formulas. That's a basic, almost kindergarten level list, and it works. Part of this is redefining what financial success actually means. We're not talking about private jets or islands. For most people, real financial success looks like stable housing for their family, a financial cushion in case of job loss or a medical emergency, the ability to retire with dignity, and the freedom to spend time with the people they care about. Those are strong, meaningful goals, and that level of success is achievable for almost everyone. Money is meant to be a tool to support your life, not a scoreboard to rank yourself against others. And yes, that's easier said than done, because comparison is natural. It's human to measure success not by what you have, but by what you have relative to someone else, your neighbor, your coworker, your sibling. But what makes this harder today than ever before is that comparison is no longer limited to a small group of people. Before we fully dive in, I just ask for one small thing. If you can, take a second to like or hype the video. It really helps to reach more people who might need these words today. Thank you. Now, your comparison group is an algorithm. Every time you open social media, you're shown someone who looks happier, richer, more successful, more put together than you, no matter how well you're actually doing. And that's why this lesson matters more now than it ever has. Managing expectations, resisting constant comparison, and staying grounded in your own goals is harder today than it's ever been, but it's also more important than ever. I see this with my own kids. When I was growing up, my definition of wealth was simple. Regular people drove old pickup trucks, and rich people drove new ones. That was it. If you had a brand new truck, you were rich. My son sees it completely differently. To him, rich means private jets and private islands because that's what he watches online. That becomes the baseline. And that's a completely different level of expectation than what I grew up with 20 or 30 years ago. And here's the hard truth. No matter how much you know about money, your kids probably aren't going to listen to you. That's normal. But it makes something incredibly important clear. If you want a healthy relationship with money, you have to develop the ability to look inward for what matters instead of constantly looking outward at influencers, algorithms, or what your neighbor is driving. A lot of people today feel like they're falling behind, especially younger adults. People in their 20s and 30s already feel like they're not making enough, like they'll never afford a home, like they'll never catch up. And for older people, the fear is different. It's the feeling that it's too late, that they have already blown their chance, that retirement may not be possible. The first place to start is empathy. These feelings are real. In many areas, especially things like home ownership, people genuinely are worse off compared to previous generations. This isn't about telling people to just feel better or be more grateful. Rising costs, medical bills, and cost of living pressures have created real stress, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. But once you start with empathy, you have to understand this. Happiness is the gap between expectations and reality. You have the life you're living, and you have the life you expect to live. The space between those two is where happiness or misery lives. And the wider that gap becomes, the worse you're going to feel. So when someone is panicking because they thought they'd be further along financially, worried they'll run out of money or never be able to retire, in many cases the issue isn't income, it's expectations. Over time, expectations spiral. Spending increases to match an identity instead of a budget. People rent nicer apartments than they can afford, travel more than they should, eat out, dress a certain way, not because it fits their financial reality, but because it fits who they think they're supposed to be. And yes, that's uncomfortable to hear, but it's also common. Almost everyone goes through this at some point. There's no shame in it. The moment you recognize it is the moment you regain control. A big reason I became so interested in this topic started by looking in the mirror and asking myself hard questions. When was I envious? When did my expectations spiral out of control? And the truth is, no one is immune to this. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I can be honest about that because I've lived it. I walked into stores, swiped my card, bought things I didn't need with money I didn't have. And the truth is, we spent money we didn't have. We racked up debt. Years later, as we were climbing our way out, something unexpected happened. I felt relief, because I could finally say to myself, I'm responsible for this. I can see how I made bad decisions because my expectations were completely out of proportion to reality. And oddly enough, admitting that gave me power. Because if I had the power to make bad decisions, then I also had the power to make better ones. A lot of this comes back to expectations. Money is incredibly easy to measure. If I say I want to be a better parent or a better partner, that's hard to define. But if I say I want a bigger apartment, more money per hour, or a few new things, that's clear. It's measurable. It's simple. And that's why people chase money and spending. It's easy to understand and easy to track. When you don't have a clear picture of what a good life actually looks like, it's easy to default to thinking that a good life just means more money. It feels simpler than asking harder questions like, how do I become a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, or a better human being? Those questions are uncomfortable. Money feels like a shortcut. A powerful example of this comes from someone who once believed that if they just made more money, all their problems would disappear. That belief gave them hope. But when the money finally came and the problem stayed, the illusion collapsed. And that's when it became clear. Money can solve some problems, but it won't fill the deeper psychological gap people are trying to fill with it. So if you're listening and telling yourself, I'm so far behind, there are two things to understand. First, you're in the right place. It's not too late. There are simple, basic behavior changes, nothing complicated, that can help you get good with money. But the deeper question you need to ask is this: what is money trying to fix for me right now? What hole am I trying to fill? And once you ask that, you can start redefining what a good life actually means. Whether you're in your 20s or your 60s, becoming a better friend, taking better care of yourself, building a life that feels meaningful. Those things don't require beating yourself up over your finances. That's the real shift. Before getting into tactics, it's important to acknowledge something real. This is a genuinely difficult moment when it comes to money, jobs, and financial stability. If you're sitting there thinking, I'm scared I won't find work, I'm scared I won't make it, that feeling is valid. That is your truth, and it deserves empathy. Where it's worth adding perspective is when people say, this is worse than it's ever been. Because when you look at how previous generations actually lived, that idea becomes more complicated. A lot of people point to the 1950s as the golden age of middle-class prosperity. But if you look closely at how the average middle-class family lived back then, it's a standard of living that most people today would consider extremely limited. Small homes, often around 800 square feet, multiple children in 2 bedrooms, no air conditioning, no washer or dryer, and none of the conveniences we now see as normal. They were content then, but that level of contentment wouldn't satisfy us today. And that's an important distinction. More money doesn't automatically create happiness. What people are really chasing isn't happiness, it's contentment. When you imagine yourself in a bigger house or on a luxury vacation, the feeling you're imagining isn't joy or excitement. It's the feeling of saying, this is enough. But what usually happens when people actually reach those milestones is that contentment doesn't last. You go on the trip and suddenly it's, if only we stayed at a better hotel. If only we stayed longer. If only we had the nicer experience. Comparison creeps in, expectations shift, and the finish line moves again. Once you understand that what you're really chasing is contentment, something important becomes clear. A lot of financial stress, a lot of the feeling of falling behind, and a lot of the gap between what you have and what you want comes from expectations, not income alone. Now, if you're thinking, I'm just not good with money, you're not alone. A lot of people carry that story with them for years. Maybe you went through a divorce, maybe you handed control to someone else and now you're starting over. The real question is, can anyone actually get good with money? The answer is yes, if they want to. Because this isn't complicated. It's basic arithmetic. Spend less than you make. Save the difference. Be patient, that's it. You could explain this to a 5-year-old. Saying I'm not good with money often becomes a way to opt out of responsibility. Bad financial habits are easy. We live in a world that encourages overspending, debt, and instant gratification. If that's what you want, it's effortless. But the moment you decide you want something different, this becomes manageable for anyone. It's not about intelligence, it's about choice. And this conversation reminds me of something I once heard a musician say. Everyone loves the story about how they had to live in their car for a year while they were starting out. But nobody actually wants to live in their car for a year. And that applies to money too. If you're in debt, getting out of it is going to require sacrifice. It usually means a downshift in lifestyle compared to what you're used to. A lot of people who say, "I'm not good with money," what they're really saying is, "I don't want to make the sacrifice." And that's an honest truth. But here's the interesting part. People are actually very willing to suffer if the goal is noble enough. Humans will work hard, struggle, and endure discomfort when they believe the outcome is worth it. So the question becomes, what is the noble goal of getting good with money? If the goal is just to make more money, that's not very motivating. But if the goal is contentment, being okay with your life, that changes everything. For me, and for most people I've seen do this well, the real goal isn't being rich. It's independence. It's waking up and knowing you can choose how you spend your day. Money becomes a tool to support that freedom, not a scoreboard. I have no interest in flashy cars or massive houses. I want control over my time and my choices. I've seen people with very little money who were completely independent, beholden to no one, influenced by no one, and they lived incredible lives because of it. And I've seen people with enormous wealth who were completely trapped by expectations, opinions, and pressure. For them, money became a financial asset, but a psychological liability. It controlled their identity. Here's a thought experiment I come back to often. Imagine living on a deserted island with your family. No one can see your house, your car, your lifestyle. If no one was watching, what would you choose? In that situation, most people instantly shift from status to utility. Status disappears when there's no audience. What matters is what actually supports a good life. And that's where the difference becomes clear. The things that impress others are often not the things that serve you and your family. You can make an enormous amount of money and still feel like you're falling behind if you're chasing other people. There's a saying that everyone envies what you have, but no one envies what it took to get there. We see the house, the car, the clothes, but we don't see the stress, the sacrifices, or the costs that came with them. That's why financial envy is so misleading. You're comparing your reality to someone else's highlight reel without knowing what else is happening in their life. And it's why studies showing that wealth doesn't guarantee happiness are so hard to accept. People hear that and think, fine, I'll be the exception. Or, let me experience it myself. Because the belief that more money will solve everything is incredibly powerful. And for people who've been there, the message is usually the same. Money can help. It just helps a lot less than you think. After more than 2 decades of studying, researching, writing, and teaching about money, the single biggest thing that keeps people broke is comparison. That constant feeling that other people have more, are doing better, and are happier. Once you step onto that treadmill, there's no finish line. There is no moment where you finally say, this is enough, because the goalpost keeps moving. If you think a bigger house will do it, it won't. If you think a raise will finally make you feel secure, it won't. And when you're on that treadmill, it becomes almost impossible to ever feel like you're doing well financially. You don't need that much to feel content. Once your basic needs are covered, food, shelter, stability, everything beyond that moves from what you need into what you want. And most of us know this intuitively. You can walk into your closet right now and probably point to a small handful of clothes you wear all the time. Everything else was something you wanted in the moment, thought you needed, or hoped would impress someone for a specific occasion. And that right there is what keeps people broke. It's simple. People may not like hearing it, but they already know it's true. One of the hardest financial skills to learn is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Because if your expectations rise at the same pace as your results, there's no logic in striving for more. You'll feel the same after putting in extra effort. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more money, more power, more status, starts increasing ambition faster than satisfaction. At that point, every step forward pushes the goalpost even further away. You start to feel like you're falling behind, and the only way to catch up feels like taking bigger and bigger risks. That idea came from self-reflection, not mastery. Because this trap is easy to fall into. There's always someone getting richer faster than you. And if your happiness depends on validation, on having what someone else has, you will never be satisfied with what's in front of you. What makes it worse is how quickly the expectation scales. You tell yourself you'll be happy once you hit a certain number. Then you hit it, and the number changes. 10,000 becomes 100,000. 100,000 becomes 1,000,000. And it keeps growing. I experienced this firsthand. As soon as some financial pressure eased or I got a small reward at work, I immediately upgraded the things I was already buying. That pattern is incredibly common. And to be clear, spending money isn't inherently bad. It's not about living like a monk or never enjoying anything. You can absolutely spend money in ways that genuinely improve your life. I've done that myself and thought, that was worth it. But everything comes back to expectations. If you don't control them, no amount of money will ever feel like enough. I grew up in a town that wasn't very wealthy. It is now, because tech money eventually moved in, but back then it was a solid middle-class place. And then I made a drastic shift from a middle-class mountain town to an area like Beverly Hills. And what that did to my definition of rich was shocking. Growing up, a rich person drove a brand new pickup truck. That was it. A new F-150 meant you had made it. Then I moved to Los Angeles, and that definition completely exploded. No matter how successful you are, you pull up to a stoplight, and even if you're driving something exotic, there are plenty of people right next to you with the same or more. And suddenly, nothing ever feels like enough. Looking back, the conditions for happiness were actually much better in that middle-class town. I managed to keep my expectations in check in LA, and honestly, a lot of that came from fear. I was always worried I wouldn't make it, so I saved aggressively. But when I look around and ask who was actually happier, it wasn't the people chasing more. It was the people living modest lives, enjoying their families, spending time with friends, taking care of their health, and not constantly comparing themselves to others. That brings up an interesting question about aspiration, especially when it comes to parents. If you ask parents what they want for their kids, most of them will say they just want them to be happy. And if you follow that up with, do you want them to be rich and successful? Most parents will say, sure, that would be great, but I really just want them to be happy. Parents say that because they know from experience that those are not the same thing. Even a modest, middle-class life can be deeply fulfilling if expectations are in check and focus stays on what actually matters. And that ties back to how we casually use the word happiness. What we usually mean is contentment, being present in your life and not constantly reaching for something else. So how do you figure out why you're spending money? Because most people spend mindlessly. They buy things out of boredom, stress, or impulse without ever stopping to ask why. A simple way to become more conscious is to recognize that every dollar you spend falls into one of two buckets. Either you're spending money to make your life and your family's life better, or you're spending money to impress other people, most of whom are strangers and not paying attention anyway. Buying food for your family is obvious, but things like cars, clothes, and upgrades often fall into that second category. And when you realize how much of your spending is driven by trying to impress people who are busy worrying about themselves, something clicks. You start to see the game for what it is. Every dollar is a choice. You're either using money as a tool to build a better life, or you're using it as a status marker to measure yourself against others. That realization alone can change the way you spend and the way you live. So how do you actually tell the difference between buying something because you genuinely need it and buying it because it looks cool, you think you'll look good in it, and you're feeling a little insecure in the moment? Because most of us don't really stop to ask that question. We just feel the urge and hit buy. I had a moment like this in college that completely changed how I think about spending. I worked as a valet at a 5-star hotel in Los Angeles. It was an incredible job. I got to drive some of the nicest cars in the world, and for a 19-year-old, that alone felt unreal. But more importantly, it was my first real window into the psychology of very wealthy people. I remember noticing something during one of my shifts. When someone pulled up in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, I would stop and admire the car, but I never looked at the driver and thought, that person is amazing. Instead, I imagined myself in the driver's seat. I imagined that if I were driving that car, people would look at me and think I was impressive. And then it hit me. I didn't care about the driver at all. I just wanted to be the driver because I thought other people would care about me. That realization was powerful. Nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are. People are too busy thinking about themselves. Even when someone seems impressed by your house or your car, what they're really doing is imagining themselves owning it, not admiring you as a person. Once that sinks in, the desire to impress others starts to lose its grip. That doesn't mean you stop caring entirely. You still want to look put together. You still want to feel confident. But the illusion that strangers are evaluating you based on your stuff starts to collapse. And when that illusion fades, contentment becomes a lot easier to reach. The truth is, people don't admire other people the way we think they do. They admire objects because they imagine having them. And when it comes to the people who actually matter in your life, your partner, your family, your closest friends, they don't care about your car or your clothes. What they care about is whether you're present, patient, supportive, and kind. We spend so much time telling ourselves that better things will make life better. But intuitively, we already know that what really matters is being a good partner, a good friend, and a good parent. And if you truly wanted strangers to be impressed by you, it wouldn't be your possessions that do it. It would be how you treat them. Now, none of this means the urge disappears overnight. Even after years of thinking about this, the pull is still there. It's powerful. You still catch yourself thinking, this thing will make me happier. But here's something that makes it undeniable. Everyone knows someone with a massive house or an incredible car who is deeply unhappy, and someone else with far less who is completely at peace. That contrast tells you everything you need to know. Having all the things you want doesn't make you become the kind of person you admire. Most of us understand that intellectually. But if you have bad spending habits, the real question is how you actually change them. And the place to start isn't budgeting, it's understanding why those habits exist in the first place. What hole are you trying to fill? What has buying these things actually done for your happiness in the past? And for most people, if they're honest, the answer is very little. That's why this process has to start with some self-reflection. You have to sit with yourself, literally or figuratively, and ask, what am I trying to achieve? Who do I want to become? Why do I want that? And why do I think these purchases are the way to get there? For a lot of people, overspending shows up as binge behavior. It becomes a stress release, a pressure valve. In your mind, the story is that if you buy these things, the problem will go away. And maybe it feels that way for a moment. But almost never does spending actually fix the emotional issue underneath it. What it does do, especially when it's done on credit, is trade short-term relief for long-term pain. That new sweater might give you a day or two of excitement, but paying it off can follow you for months, years, or even decades. And every dollar of debt you take on from bad spending habits is a piece of your future that no longer belongs to you. It's your time, your freedom, your choices, owned by someone else. The opposite is also true. Every dollar you save is a piece of your future that you own, a piece of independence you've taken back. I've thought about it this way since I was young. Every dollar saved felt like reclaiming a dollar of my future. That mindset completely changed my relationship with money. Saving wasn't about buying something later. It was about buying freedom now. When I save money, I don't think about what I'll spend it on someday. I think about what it gives me today. If I save $100, I see that as purchasing $100 of independence. That money gives me peace of mind right now. It lets me sleep better tonight. It gives me more control over my life today, not in some distant future. A lot of people struggle with saving because they don't understand its purpose. If you're barely getting by, putting away $20 can feel pointless. It feels like, why even bother? I might as well spend it now. And if you see saving as delayed gratification, that logic makes sense. But that's the wrong frame. Saving isn't delaying happiness, it's buying it. When you realize that even a small amount of savings increases your independence immediately, the entire game changes. That $20 isn't about the future. It's about feeling more secure, more capable, more in control right now. Most people think the flex is the car, the house, or the clothes. But real flex is independence. The ability to wake up and choose how you spend your time. And here's the part most people miss. You don't need extreme wealth to have that. You can have independence at a relatively modest level of income and assets. Some of the most independent people have very little, and some of the wealthiest people in the world have none at all. You can be completely beholden to the opinions and expectations of other people, no matter how much money you have. There are multi-billionaires who are far less independent than people with almost nothing. And that's an empowering realization, because independence isn't a number, it's a feeling. It's a story you tell yourself about how much control you have over your life. There is no financial level where you suddenly become free. You can have very little money and feel completely independent, and you can have an enormous amount of money and feel trapped. That mindset carries directly into investing as well. Long-term success in investing has very little to do with being clever or having inside information. It has everything to do with long-term thinking and avoiding jealousy-driven behavior. The engine behind that is compound interest. At its simplest, compounding means this. If you invest $100 and earn 10% in a year, you now have 110. The next year you earn 10%, not just on the original 100, but on the full 110. So your gains start earning gains of their own. Over time, that growth accelerates. Extend that over decades, 30, 40, 50 years, and the results become extraordinary. A powerful example of this is the most successful investor of all time. Nearly all of his net worth, roughly 99% of it, was built after the age of 60. Not because his returns suddenly became incredible, but because he let compounding work for a very long time. That's the key insight. Investing success isn't about how high your returns are in any given year. It's about how long you can keep going. And that's what makes this so empowering for ordinary people. You don't need to beat Wall Street. You don't need to outsmart hedge funds or have elite connections. If you can be an average investor for an above average amount of time, you can end up with extraordinary results. In fact, if you're average for 30 years, you'll outperform most professionals. I've seen this firsthand. People with no financial background, no special education, no insider knowledge, just patience, discipline, and consistency. Investing a little bit every month, year after year, never trying to time the market, never panicking, never chasing trends. Over 40 years, that approach quietly compounds into results that rival top professionals. And it happens without doing anything fancy. The only real skill involved is patience. That's why short-term comparisons are so destructive. People get discouraged because they think they're not doing well enough this year. But investing isn't about this year. It's about how long you can stay in the game. There are professional investors who were never the top performer in any single year, never impressive in the moment, but over decades, they ended up the best. The same principle applies to getting out of debt. There's no trick, no shortcut. It's years of consistently spending less than you earn, lowering lifestyle expectations, and patiently clawing your way forward. It's not glamorous, it's slow, but it works. And once you've lived through that process, you develop a deep respect for stability and independence because you know exactly what it costs to get there. A lot of people are afraid of losing the money they already have. And if you have that fear, the question isn't whether you should invest, it's how much. Because investing isn't one size fits all. It has to fit your personality. I've always had a worst case scenario mindset. I've never been buried in debt, and I've always been a disciplined saver, but I tend to prepare for things going wrong. That mindset shaped how I invest. If you looked at my net worth, only about half, maybe a little more, is in the stock market. Most financial advisors would tell someone my age or income level to invest far more aggressively. But that doesn't work for me. My financial goal isn't maximizing returns. It's maximizing how well I sleep at night. I don't care about beating the market or being in the top percentile of investors. I don't want money to be a source of stress. I want it to be a tool that gives me peace of mind. Because of that, when markets crashed in 2008 during COVID, it didn't derail me. I was never all in. I always had enough cash and conservative savings to fall back on if things went wrong. That balance works for me. And yes, you can overdo that. You can be too conservative. But the right approach depends on what you're trying to optimize for. That's the real question people need to ask themselves, ideally with their partner. What are we actually trying to maximize? Because no amount of investment return is worth lying awake at 2 a.m. wondering if you took on too much risk. For me, nothing compensates for that kind of anxiety. At this stage of my life, when I think about savings, I don't think about returns. I think about protection. I think about having a cushion if something unexpected happens, health issues, career disruption, anything that would otherwise create hardship for my family. That's what money is for, in my view. Not winning a spreadsheet competition, but creating stability. And this goes back to a core idea. You either use money as a tool to live a good, content life, or you use it as a scoreboard to compare yourself to other people. History is full of stories, many of them involving very wealthy people, who turned investing into a competition, tried to outperform everyone else, and ended up worse off. They chased a goal that had no real impact on their quality of life. My approach has always been simple. I invest consistently, month after month. I don't try to time the market. I rarely sell. And I plan to hold those investments for decades, possibly for the rest of my life. If you looked at everything I own, it's straightforward. A house, some cash, index funds, that's it. Nothing complicated. And that's intentional. The more complex your investments are, the harder it becomes to stick with them over long periods of time. And when it comes to investing, that's all that really matters. Not brilliance, not timing, not outsmarting anyone, just patience. The ability to keep going year after year without panicking or constantly changing course. Patience matters on every level. Patience with the actions you're taking. Patience with yourself when your life isn't matching your expectations yet. And patience with your emotions, especially in those moments when you feel like buying something new might take the edge off how you're feeling. That urge passes, but only if you give it time. For someone who's never invested before, who feels intimidated by the stock market or avoids even looking at their money, the most important thing to understand is this. Investing works over time, but there is a cost. Not a fee you pay to an advisor or a broker. The real cost of investing is volatility and uncertainty. That's the price of admission. Historically, the stock market has done very well over long periods. But no one knows when those returns will show up. You might get a great year followed by a decade of stagnation, or nothing for years and then everything at once. You have to live with not knowing. That discomfort is exactly what you're being compensated for. If you want certainty, there are places for that, like a savings account. There's very little volatility there, and the returns are predictable, but they're also low because there's no uncertainty. Higher long-term returns require patience through uncertainty. And for people who can tolerate that over 10, 20, or 30 years, history shows the results can be extraordinary. This ties into an important distinction between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich means you can afford the things you want. You can pay your bills, buy what you like, live comfortably. Wealthy is something different. Wealth is the money you're not spending. It's savings. It's investments. It's the cushion that gives you independence, both financial and psychological. Wealth gives you the ability to live life on your terms, without constantly reacting to what you think other people expect from you. And history offers powerful examples of the difference. One of the richest families the world has ever known accumulated wealth on a scale that's almost impossible to imagine. And instead of dispersing it thoughtfully, it was passed down generation after generation with the expectation that heirs would simply spend as extravagantly as possible. The result wasn't fulfillment, it was misery. Biographies from those families show a pattern of unhappiness, lack of purpose, and complete dependence on social expectations. These were people who had everything money could buy, yet no real independence. Their lives, even their personal choices, were dictated by the weight of wealth and the expectations attached to it. They were rich beyond belief, but they weren't free. And that contrast matters, because it shows that money alone doesn't create independence. How you relate to it does. One of the most interesting parts of that story is that today, almost all of that money is gone. There are still a few heirs with some wealth, but for the most part, it disappeared. And the first person in that family line to receive no trust fund, no inheritance, was someone many people recognize today. He's talked openly about how being the first in generations who was told, "You have to figure it out yourself," was probably the best thing that could have happened to him. He had to build his own career, earn his own money, and find his own path. And by his own account, that independence played a major role in his fulfillment. That contrast says everything. The richest family in the world, by any historical measure, ended up with very little real wealth in the way that actually matters. They had money, but they didn't have independence. They didn't have the freedom to live life on their own terms. And that's the real difference between being rich and being wealthy. It always comes back to one question. What are you actually using money for? When you're clear on that, it changes everything. How you earn, how you spend, and how you save. Because when you frame it honestly, the choice becomes obvious. Would you rather earn a modest income, have strong relationships, good health, a stable marriage, time with your kids, and real friendships? Or would you rather earn a massive income while living a life full of stress, broken relationships, poor health, and constant pressure? When you lay it out that way, the answer is clear. And yet, even knowing that, the pull of more money is still powerful. Most people believe they'll be the exception, the one who gets everything without the trade-offs. Everyone thinks that. So if you're in your 30s, just starting out, maybe not saving much yet, the most important advice isn't complicated. Most financial problems don't come from a lack of intelligence. They come from lack of awareness. Many people genuinely don't know how much money they make or how much they spend each month. If you ask them, they either couldn't tell you or they'd guess and be wrong. The simplest habit that creates the biggest change is awareness. Check your bank balance every day. It takes seconds. Just know what's coming in and what's going out. That awareness alone changes behavior. It's the modern version of balancing a checkbook. Knowing where you stand, down to the dollar, builds control and confidence over time. And the other key idea is this. Financial independence isn't all or nothing. It exists on a spectrum. Saving $20 might feel pointless, but every dollar you save is a piece of your future that you own. Every dollar adds a little more comfort, a little more resilience, a little more protection against job loss, medical issues, or unexpected expenses. Independence isn't built in one big moment. It's built $1 at a time. If you see independence as all or nothing, either you're wildly rich or there's no point, I understand why saving feels pointless. Why bother? But when you see every dollar you save as a piece of your future that you control, everything changes. That dollar is a better night of sleep down the road. It's peace of mind. And it's not idle money. It can give you satisfaction right now, today, simply by knowing it's there. Some of the best financial decisions I've ever made weren't things I did. They were things I didn't do. In my early 20s, I almost bought a house I couldn't really afford. It would have locked me into a place I didn't want to stay and limited my options for years. Renting instead gave me freedom. I could move to where the opportunities were. I could adapt. Looking back, that flexibility was an incredible gift. even though at the time it didn't feel like the right move according to society's expectations. And that's where expectations play such a powerful role. If you expect to own a home by a certain age, and reality doesn't match that, it feels like failure. But if you shift your expectations and say, markets change, rates change, circumstances change, and if I stay patient, I'll figure this out when the timing is right, the stress eases. A lot of financial anxiety doesn't come from money itself, but from expectations handed to you by society, family, or comparison. Another major shift for me was realizing how important saving is compared to the constant obsession with making more money. For a long time, I thought earning more was the solution, but what really matters is how much you need to be content. If you don't need much to live a good life, that becomes a superpower for saving. Think about it this way. If one person needs $10,000 a month to feel satisfied, and another needs a fraction of that to feel just as content, the second person is getting far more leverage from their savings. The gap between expectations and reality is what supercharges financial security. When I was younger, saving even a small amount made a massive difference. The wealthiest I've ever felt was when I had $5,000 in the bank. At that stage of my life, it felt enormous, almost unreal. Looking back, it's striking how powerful that feeling was then, and how muted it would feel now. That's what rising expectations do. They quietly rob you of the sense of progress and satisfaction you once had. The value of your savings isn't just about the number. It's about what that number means relative to the life you're trying to live. And once you understand that, saving feels completely different. As for shifting focus away from obsessing over earning more, it always comes back to independence. You can make a high income and still have no freedom if every dollar is already spoken for. But with reasonable expectations and a lifestyle that fits them, even modest savings can give you real security and contentment. Ambition isn't bad. Wanting to earn more is natural and healthy. But there's a powerful difference between wanting more and needing more. Having savings that tell you, even if something went wrong, I'd be okay, changes how you live. And at this stage of life, especially with a family, that sense of stability matters more than anything else. Even if income disappeared tomorrow, we'd still be okay because of the savings built over decades. That's the difference. Income is fragile. Savings are resilient. Over the course of your life, the odds that your income drops to zero at some point are extremely high, almost guaranteed. It might be brief or it might last longer, but it will happen. And when it does, the savings you built beforehand become the most valuable thing you own. That's why savings should be treated like an expense, just like rent or food. If you see saving as optional, it's almost inevitable that it gets skipped. But when you view it as essential, it becomes the most important part of your financial life. Life is fragile, careers are fragile, economies are fragile. We live in a constant state of uncertainty, and savings are how you protect yourself against that reality. Even if you have no interest in learning about money, you still have an obligation to respect it, just like your health. You can ignore it if you want, but it will affect your life whether you like it or not. A simple way to make saving a habit is the 10% rule. No matter how much you earn, save 10%. If you earn $50, save $5. If you earn $100, save $10. The amount doesn't matter nearly as much as the habit. Anything is exponentially better than nothing. I still remember being young and transferring small amounts, $5, $10, $15, into savings. It might sound meaningless, but it wasn't. That was a meal in my future. That was peace of mind I didn't have before. That mindset compounds just like money does. Another powerful tool is automation. Whenever you can remove behavior and emotion from the equation, you should. Set your bank to automatically move money into savings every paycheck. We're all emotional. We're all biased. The more you automate, the better your long-term outcomes will be. And if you're thinking, what's the point? I can barely pay my bills. Hear this clearly. You're not alone. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Millions of people are in the same position. Feeling guilt or embarrassment about money is common, but it's misplaced. It doesn't make you a bad person. The most important thing to understand is that this is within your control. There are countless examples of people from the most modest backgrounds who built stability through patience and discipline. The starting point doesn't matter nearly as much as the behavior. When he passed away, he left millions of dollars to charity, and people were stunned. How does a janitor, a gas station attendant, end up with that kind of money? The answer wasn't brilliance or luck. It was behavior. He saved what little he could, $10 here, $20 there, maybe $100 in a year. He invested it in the stock market and then did the hardest part. He left it alone for decades. 70 years of patience. That was the entire story. And that's the point. With the right mindset and the right behavior, you don't need much else to achieve extraordinary results over time. Consistency and patience do most of the work. One of the most important lessons in all of this is the idea that enough is better than more. Wanting less can improve your well-being just as much as earning more money. And desiring less doesn't mean giving up or living joylessly. It's actually the opposite. Contentment is what allows you to truly enjoy the house you live in, the clothes you wear, and the experiences you have. Having enough doesn't mean you lose ambition. You can still work hard, aim higher, and want to earn more year after year. But at the same time, you have to manage your expectations, because wealth isn't just what you have. It's the gap between what you have and what you want. The wider that gap is, the worse you feel. The narrower it is, the better you feel. The goal isn't to kill ambition, it's to combine aspiration with appreciation. The problem is that gratitude isn't natural. Our default setting is always wanting more and believing that more will finally make us happy. Being intentional about gratitude takes effort. But every psychologist will tell you the same thing. Nothing is more powerful for long-term well-being than keeping expectations in check and appreciating what you already have. There's a powerful example of this from one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. Despite living most of his adult life with a severe physical condition that took away almost all bodily control, he described himself as deeply happy and grateful. When asked about the secret to his happiness, his answer was simple. His expectations were reduced to zero early in life, and everything that came after felt like a bonus. That perspective didn't erase hardship, but it made gratitude easier. And while no one hopes for trauma or loss, it's often through difficult moments, job loss, divorce, setbacks, that people are forced to recalibrate expectations and start appreciating what they still have. The takeaway is this: if you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you feel behind, if you have no savings, you are not stuck. Comparison, unrealistic expectations, and lack of awareness are not permanent conditions. They're habits, and habits can be changed. The moment you stop comparing yourself to others, bring expectations back to reality, and recognize that small, consistent actions matter, you gain a foothold. From there, change becomes possible. I remember reading a story years ago about a family whose house burned down completely. A husband, a wife, and their children lost everything. The home they had grown up in and the future they had imagined. In the middle of the devastation, with everything gone, the mother gathered everyone together and said, "Everything we need to be happy is right here, the 5 of us. This is all that matters." And that moment captures something universal. No matter your situation, there is a version of that truth in everyone's life. You already have the tools you need to be as happy as you're capable of becoming. That doesn't minimize your problems or dismiss real hardship. It simply recognizes that happiness is shaped by the gap between expectations and reality, and you have more control over that gap than you realize. When you stop comparing yourself to what you don't have and start appreciating what you do have, at whatever level of life you're in, you move closer to contentment. Instead of waking up focused on what's missing and what that absence might fix, you start recognizing the things you do control. Your mindset, your resilience, your ability to move forward without letting society define your worth. That shift doesn't just bring peace, it also unlocks your ability to act. Once you get out of your own way, you're far more capable than you think. If you want to change the story you tell yourself about money, it starts here. Money can make your life better, but not in the way most people think, and not to the degree most people expect. Money works best as a tool to support a good life. Where it becomes damaging is when it turns into a scoreboard for comparison, where net worth becomes self-worth. That story is broken, and it quietly makes people miserable. Real wealth isn't just a number. It's the ability to manage your expectations, regulate your emotions, and feel genuine gratitude for what you already have. That's a form of freedom money can't buy. If there's one action to take from all of this, it's this. Realize that other people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. Most goals driven by comparison come from wanting to impress people who are busy worrying about themselves. Once you let go of that, your expectations settle, and that's when contentment becomes possible. If you're still here, you're part of the few who actually followed this all the way through. Type "I choose independence" in the comments. Not for me, for you. That's the line between consuming and committing. Remember, only you decide how limitless you are.
If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share your thoughts in the comments, and share this video with others. For more content like this, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the bell icon. Thanks for watching.